What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Shrimp Scene. My name's Lucas, and if you're new here, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button if you like this video, and remember to subscribe and comment down below if you like what I'm doing here and want to see more. Thank you to everybody who's already hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. So in this video, I'm going to talk about feeding your shrimp, how much and how often, and I'm also going to talk about some of the foods that I use. I also want you guys to remember that when you're putting food into your tank, you're feeding the entire ecosystem. There's much more going on the microscopic level than just feeding your shrimp. Your whole tank is consuming that food, not just what you're intending to feed. Once your tank is cycled, it's become a community of organisms and microorganisms working together to create this balance in your tank. And this is really important to keep in mind because the microorganisms in your tank rely on that food as well, and if you overfeed or it's overdone, it can result in really unstable water chemistry, a bad bacteria bloom, or an increase in a population of pests like planaria or snails or detritus worms or stuff like that. It's important you look at your shrimp as part of the ecosystem in your tank and be responsible when feeding to keep conditions stable for them. Feeding schedules can be very different depending on how established your microclimate is and how many shrimp you actually have in the tank. So let's get into this. So the first food that I'm going to talk about is dried oak, hickory, and mulberry leaves. And that's because they're usually free and easy for anyone to get. I find that they really benefit the ecosystem in your aquarium as a whole while releasing beneficial tannins into the tank and also acting as a long-lasting food source for your shrimp. They're also a great surface area for biofilm to grow so that your shrimp have plenty of places to graze on. I usually feed different types of leaves once or twice a week, maybe every 2 weeks, depending on how long that tank's been set up and how many shrimp are in that particular tank. I also find that grinding the leaves into a fine powder is super beneficial for the baby shrimp, as I've explained in previous videos. So the next food I'm going to talk about is canned green beans with no salt added. And that's because each regular can of green beans has around 290 milligrams of sodium in them. And shrimp are, in general, fairly sensitive to salt. So I stick to the green beans with no salt added. Some of the things I like about green beans are that they're a great natural, non-processed food for the shrimp. They can be bought just about anywhere, at any grocery store, Convenient Mart, or Walmart, and they don't foul the water very quickly. You can generally leave them in for anywhere from 48 to 72 hours, or just simply until the shrimp or fish finish them off. I tend to feed green beans every other day, sometimes daily, depending on which tank it is and how quickly they finish them off. I find it's also a great food for the snails, the plecos, the ottos, and my live bearers as well. They all eat the green beans right up. Now this next food is the one that I feed every day in my shrimp and fish room. It's my go-to, and that is fluval bug bites, and specifically the pleco formula. And that's because it's got great ingredients like black soldier fly larvae, salmon, peas, alfalfa concentrate, and a few more. It's also eaten more aggressively than any other food that I offer my shrimp. There's not a single other food that I keep in stock that my shrimp react to like the bug bites. Another thing I like to do with this food is to mix it 50-50 with the tropical formula and grind it into a fine powder in a blender or a smoothie maker, and I use that as my fry food. Up next is Bacteriode. Now I find this food essential for when I'm just starting a shrimp tank, or if my tank has a very, very heavy population of shrimp in it. Bacteriode is said to add important microorganisms, amino acids, and enzymes to your aquarium. It's also said to enhance the water quality and development of biofilms essential for shrimp. The biofilm created then improves survival rates of the young shrimp while also improving their nutrient uptake and digestive system. The bacteria cultures in this food actually activate as soon as they come into contact with water. And it's also said to remove toxic substances and provide your shrimp tank with a great microclimate, which is all of the little organisms that make up your ecosystem. Another food that's very similar to Bacteriode is Shrimp Fit Plus. Now this is a special food and immune system booster for your shrimp. It acts as a preventative for bacterial infections with nutritionally important active ingredients like beta-glucans, minerals, and chitin. Forgive me if I butchered that. Now when it comes to Bacteriode and Shrimp Fit Plus, I strictly follow the exact feeding directions on the back of the container. Now, I've heard of some people playing with this a little bit, but I've also heard horror stories about people overdosing Bacteriode and it causing outrageous bacteria blooms or something like that. So I stick to strictly feeding it exactly as the package says. Now, to be transparent with you guys, I do want to say that the last few foods that you see here off to the right that I'm going to talk about are foods that I've tested over the years and they didn't really make the cut. It's not that they're not good foods, it's just either they were too expensive, the ingredients didn't meet my standards, or simply put, my shrimp and fish just didn't eat it. With Shrimp King Complete being the next one, I don't want you guys to think that that's not a food that I wouldn't recommend. I love this food and my shrimp went crazy for it, and it also has great ingredients like nettle and dandelion. It's very high in minerals, and there's a huge line of different foods like the protein blend, the snowflake, the complete. The only one that I wouldn't recommend buying is the dried leaf mix. So overall, like I said, this is a very great food and my shrimp loved it. The only thing that I had to gripe about it was that it's very expensive and it's not really sold local for me. This really used to be my go-to food and one of my favorites, but through more testing, the negatives kind of outweighed the positive. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't feed this, I'm just kind of giving my personal opinion. Now, if I was rich and could buy, any food that I wanted, I would probably always keep at least one of the Shrimp King line of food in stock at all times. That said, I'm not though, and I find that my shrimp are thriving all the same from the other foods that I'm feeding that are just much less expensive. But overall, I would just treat this like any other pellet and feed every day or two, depending on the size of your tank and how many shrimp are actually in it. The cobalt you see there was a flake that I had tried when I had just started out keeping shrimp. Now, I'm not really big on anything that has probiotics in it, and this is the Spirulina probiotic flake. Now, it does have decent ingredients, but I did find that over time my shrimp prefer other algae flake or pellet, and overall any type of medicinal or probiotic food just really doesn't go over well with shrimp or fish. 9 times out of 10, the probiotic flake, or the flake that has the medicine in it, which in this case would be the blue flake in this food, just goes untouched by all of the shrimp, all the fish, and just floats down to the bottom and ends up rotting. So overall, I ended up switching to a different type of pellet, and this is just something that I never really looked into getting again. Next is the Geraci Diet for hermit crabs. This is a food made by Seachem, and another one of those that I had tried when I had just started keeping shrimp. Now, I found that they really enjoyed this food. It has great ingredients and minerals like calcium to help with molting. Some of the reasons that I stopped feeding this food, though, was because of how long it would float at the surface. It would end up causing cloudy water once it sank, and it's originally made for terrestrial hermit crabs and not for shrimp. The omega-1 veggie rounds had stayed in rotation a little bit longer when I had first started keeping shrimp, because I hadn't quite found that right algae wafer, and it has pretty good ingredients, which, if you can't tell, I really pay attention to that kind of stuff. But over time, I found that I didn't quite get as strong of a reaction from my shrimp as I did compared to other foods, and occasionally the veggie rounds would cloud the water. The last food that I'm going to talk about is the National Geographic Shrimp and Lobster Pellet. This is the very, very first shrimp food that I had ever bought, and I found that my shrimp readily accepted it. But this food is what led to the testing of all the others, because of the fact that shrimp-specific food was so much more expensive, and also that I had accidentally knocked over this container of food into an aquarium a few weeks after getting it. It really frustrated me that you pay an outrageous price for such a small container of food just because it was made for shrimp. I found that this really kind of turned me away from, and could possibly be a complete turnoff for a beginner in this hobby. And that's really why I wanted to make this video, is to show some of my experiences, some cheap and easy shrimp foods, and some foods that I stuck with over the years, and to also show that you don't have to buy the most expensive food or shrimp specific food to be successful at breeding and keeping shrimp. Well, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.